Okay, this session is entitled Imagine the Possibilities Using Language to Reinvent Our Afro-Futures. And I'm going to have all of my materials available if you wanted to follow along on this Google site. So let me put that in the chat. Okay, so that is a Google site that I created for this presentation. All right. And let me see if I can go into presenter mode here. Okay. Okay, hopefully you can see my screen here. Okay, so the objectives for this session is you will be able to learn how word study, and in this case, I'm going to be focusing on structured word inquiry, and wordless picture books can be used to teach how realities are constructed and reconstructed. And so I will be referring to materials on this particular Google site, and I will also drop some links in the chat that I would like us to go to, just in case you can't get to the site right away. So Ruha Benjamin, in her book, Imagination, a Manifesto, has this idea of creating an imaginary. And I kind of think of it like how Disney has their Imaginarium. And she says an imaginary is a collective projection of desirable and a feasible future. So our projections of a desirable and a feasible future. The collective casts a critical light on the imposition of a dominant imagination that presents itself as appealing and universal. So we don't want the technocrats and the Disney folks creating imagining the future for us. We want to do that for ourselves. So for this conference, you are now in my imaginary. So imagine the possibilities of a different world in which we can all flourish. Think about that word possibility. If something could realistically happen, then it's a possibility. A possibility is also defined as a future prospect or potential. And that key word potential is going to be very important for us. Let's put that aside. Let's look at the etymology of possibilities. So when we back it up, it goes down to the word possible. And possible is actually an adjective. That may be something that's capable of existing, occurring, or being done. And it's a word used around mid 14th century from Old French possible and directly from Latin possibilis, that can be done, from posse, to be able, and that is linked to potent. So when we think about the word potent, potent means really strong, having great influence. So the words potent and potential both come from the Latin word potentia, which means power. Okay, keep that in mind. Potentia, potential, potent, power. So potency can refer to strength, power, or influence, while potential can refer to abilities or talents that may be developed. So one of my favorite teachers, online teachers, I never met him in person, but he's my online teacher, Kaba Hiawatha Kabini, has in his book, The Shabaka Stone, a section on potential. And he says, there's something that's potential energy, which is energy at rest. And then we have kinetic energy, which is energy in motion. So he says the conversion of potential energy into activated motion is the process of becoming. And that's what we're doing with our students. We are helping them to convert that potential energy into activated motion. But a lot of times the motions that schools want them to activate is not in alignment with the African essence of the students that we work with. So becoming is connected to our Afro-futures. So what exactly is Afro-futurism? That's a term that I've been trying to get myself acclimated to, which when I Googled it, it said it was coined by Mark Deary. But later on, I found out that that is not true. A lot of these algorithms are set up to steal our knowledge and to give attribute to others who don't deserve it. So there's a professor, Celaloni, I think I'm pronouncing it right, Keto, and I believe he's from South Africa. Keto asserted, as futurologists, she or he can speculate, engage beyond the next century to create, in sharp contrast, a time map on which to trace the events of the past, create history through action in the present, and plot the path of possible future action. So we need a good grasp of our past in order to create that map, if you will. And I'm going to refer back to Keto's quote shortly. Now, how did Derry get credited with coining the term? Well, he simply asked the question, can a community whose past has been deliberately rubbed out and whose energies have subsequently been consumed by the search for legible traces of its history, imagine possible futures? The nerve of this guy, right? Asking that question, knowing that our histories have been obliterated, as Ivan Van Sertima said. It's like our history was blown to smithereens, and now we have to take the time and energy to put it all back together so that we can map the future that we want. So I came across Dr. Ronaldo Anderson out of Temple, and he says, Afrofuturism is equal to potential, which is equal to our power. So he says, how we locate ourselves in space and time with agency, that's the key word there, agency is our Afrofuturism. So agency is the state of being in action. Remember that kinetic energy that we talked about earlier? Or exerting power. How is it that we can exert power over our own futures? So it should not be mixed up with Afro fantasy. Afrofuturism has several theoretical dimensions. So he says dimension 1 is metaphysics or ontology. Dimension 2 is aesthetics. Dimension 3 is the theoretical and applied science. Dimension 4 is the social science. And dimension 5 is the programmatics. But I don't really have time to go into those dimensions, but I bring it to your attention because a lot of the children's literature that's being purported as Afrofuturistic trade books and media tends to be more Afro-fantasy than Afrofuturistic. So my question that I like to pose is, how are the dimensions of Afrofuturism 2.0, which Anderson just updated it, he says it's 2.0, applied to African agency? That's the thing that we have to look for, is the agency. So when we think about the materials that we're using with our students, does it keep Africans trapped in the Eurocentric web? Does the author's vision keep people of African descent trapped where you see death, domination, and destruction? And that's what Dr. Leonard Jeffries calls the 3Ds. These are spaces that support Eurocentric values, Eurocentric interests, and Eurocentric principles. That keeps us trapped in our current state where Black is always on the bottom, white is always on top. We don't want to keep replicating that. So Obinfo Odadele Kambone is an African-American who actually moved back to Ghana. And he says that we should have what he calls uncolonized space. So does these different medias that we're using with children that purport to be Afrofuturism, does it give the vision that allows individuals of African descent to function in uncolonized space with full agency? What Dr. Leonard Jeffries would call communal, cooperative, and collective spaces. Spaces that support Afrocentric values, interests, and principles. So if you get a moment, take a look at those different books. Is there an imposition of a dominant imagination that presents itself as appealing and universal. And that's what Ruha Benjamin says. Are these mediums created by these different authors imposing a dominant imagination on us? We don't want that. So Audre Lorde says, if I didn't define myself for myself, I would be crunched into other people's fantasies for me and eaten alive. So we have to define ourselves, and we do that through language. And right now, we're using the colonizers' language, but we'll get back to that shortly. So why study Black history? So Anderson suggests that Afro-futurism 2.0 is the future in conversation with the past. So the further we go back in time, the better the time map. And let's see what Kaba Hiawatha Kamini has to say about that. So I want to see if you guys can hear. If you can't, I think I may need to unshare and then make sure that I have it where you could hear my computer. Okay, so I want to share sound. Okay. Okay, let's try this and let me know if you can hear it.
There is a connection.
Okay.
That we can make today that will bridge yesterday and tomorrow. And I use the idea of a slingshot as a metaphor for what it is that I'm speaking of. You have a slingshot and you put an object in the sling and pull it back. The further back you go, the further in front of you, you are going to project that projectile. And when young people said to me, well, Brother Kaba, why do we need to study the past? What purpose does the past serve? I would use this metaphor. Let me put your brain in the sling, the intellectual sling, the spiritual sling. Let me put your brain in there and let me pull you back in the past. And the further back I can take your brain, the further in the future I can project it. Prophets are not psychics. They're just good historians. Because when you know what happened in the past, you can interpret what's happening in the present and predict what's going to happen in the future.
Okay. So I love that analogy that Kaba uses, where how far back does our slingshot go? And Joyce King always says we should not start with slavery because how is that going to help us with our time map? The further back we go, we can realize our power and our potential. And the further we can be projected into the future that we want. So one of my favorite scholars, Amos Wilson, stated, to manipulate history is to manipulate consciousness. And to manipulate consciousness is to manipulate possibilities. And to manipulate possibilities is to manipulate power. And that's what's happening. Our history is being manipulated, and therefore our possibilities and our power is being manipulated. And I took this from Dr. Marie Charles. She's a curriculum specialist in, I want to say, Liverpool, London. And she's doing work around missing faces in teaching and how we can stop the manipulation of our history. Amos Wilson also recommended that we read this book, Cognitive Development, Its Cultural and Social Foundations. And I found it online for free. So on that Google site, there's a link there. But what I find that's interesting that people don't tell you is that Vygotsky and Luria stress that mental development, in this case, mental being cognitive, must be viewed as a historical process in which the child's social and non-social environment induces and the development of mediating processes and the various higher mental functions. So look at that. Our cognitive development is a historical process. We need history. We need it. So, and I'm trying to get away from the colonizer's word of history and say our story, right? We need our story. But historical in the context of child development has generally been interpreted as an individual phenomenon, Although Luria has always emphasized that word meanings provide the child with the distilled results of the history of his or her society. Let's put a pin in that. I'm going to come back to these word meanings there. So here is Robin Walker again out of London. And I like how our brothers and sisters in the diaspora is coming together to build this collective knowledge that we can all learn from each other. And he gives 3 reasons why Black history matters. So let's see what he says here.
There are 3 reasons why we study our history. The first is to confront limiting beliefs, because there's a relationship between what you believe and what you think and how you feel. There's a relationship between how you feel and what actions you take. There's a relationship between what actions you take and the results that you get. And the results that you get influences what you believe and what you think. So it's very important that that is a positive feedback loop. And this is why history is important, because that way you can confront beliefs that are limiting you. The second reason why we study our history is to build a team. I have to see value in you. You have to see value in me. We have to see value in each other. And the way we see value in each other is by understanding our shared history. The third reason why we study our history is so that you've got something to comfort this child. This meme here says, what Black children feel like after being taught their ancestors were just slaves. Everybody's looking at that Black boy. Everyone's pointing at him. He's descended from slaves. So every time the word slave gets mentioned, that's him. And no doubt when you were at school and slavery got mentioned, that was you too, with your head bowed. Now, what do you tell that child? Well, the only way you can tell your child that their ancestors weren't just slaves is to know what we were doing in early Africa, what our heritage is, what we can be proud of, so that you realize that our ancestors weren't just slaves.
Okay. What are your thoughts on that? I could totally relate to Robin Walker when he said that Black child, that was me, in school when I was learning history. I was thinking, is that all? Is that all? Any thoughts on that? Feel free to put it in the chat or unmute. All right. Okay, so let's proceed while you think about
There are
that
3
piece.
reasons.
Oops, sorry. So I had a little short quiz there, but we don't necessarily have to take it. Let's see. I was the child pushing back, asking why. Oh, yes. And see, I used to be that child until my teachers kept calling my parents saying I'm a social butterfly. I talk too much. And of course, my parents listening to the teachers would always, discipline me. So I was just like, oh, the heck with it. Okay. So basically, the answers to this quiz is everything is true. It's just reflecting on what Robin Walker was saying there. And then this piece right here is Dr. Clyde Winters. And I just love this little short segment. It's about a minute, but look at those children there. Aren't they beautiful children? Let's hear what Winters says.
You see, Black history matters. Black history situates your place in society. History tells you who you are. History promotes or discourages self-esteem. Look at these kids, you see? They could have been my kids. On the way to the museum, we used to take our kids to the museum. My wife would be in the front, I'll be in the back. And then you had these, then you had these 4, first we had 3, then you had 4, then you have 5, then you have 6. They're walking in the front, they're behind their mom, and I'm behind them, so that we can make sure that they were okay. But you love to think about these smiles. How many of you out there who have children just wish they would never grow up?
And they do grow up fast. But look at these kids, right? History situates your place in society. So if we're always staged as slaves, then what is our place in society? It tells you who you are, and it promotes or discourages self-esteem. So getting back to Luria, where they were talking about Vygotsky and Luria applied this concept of mediation. So there's that key word here. And if you ever study Vygotsky, you know that he says language is a mediator, right? So they applied the concept of mediation almost exclusively to the development of mental processes in children, especially the role of language in development. So historical processes bring about the development of mediating. In this case, the mediating is linguistic processes and the various higher mental and cognitive functions. So Amos Wilson said that our history is being manipulated. And one way that it is being manipulated is through language. And so I included this reading on how English is a racist language. And let's just hear what Lisa Delpit has to say about that.
Indeed, of course, psychologists understand that recent research has indicated that 80 to 90% of our daily brain activity is subconscious. Most of what we do is a result of subconscious physiological functioning or subconscious psychological functioning. So even unconsciously, when we look at a low-income African-American child or a school, part of us responds to these negative stereotypes, whether we're engaged in that response or not. Author Beverly Tatum talks about how people become smog breathers. She said, if you live in Los Angeles, you breathe smog. You don't want to breathe smog, you don't plan to breathe smog, you don't go out of your house in the morning, say, today I'm going to breathe me some smog. She just says that if you live in Los Angeles, you breathe smog. She says if you live in America, in the United States of America, we breathe racism. And it doesn't matter what color we are. That's an important part here. We don't try to be, we aren't usually conscious of the racism we breathed. We just go around our regular lives. And it affects our interactions. Indeed, according to a research report issued by Stanford University's recruitment to expand diversity and excellence program, the implicit association test, which purportedly tests for subconscious racial preferences, found that 75% of whites and Asians demonstrated an implicit bias for whites over blacks. But hold on, black people. Close to 30% of black people also demonstrated an implicit bias for whites over blacks, which goes to show us that the racism fog really affects us all. We're so unconscious of these realities that we seldom see how even our language is embedded with racist overtones. I'm going to share a tongue-in-cheek essay from Robert Moore on racism in the English language. And we have an expert reader for this one.
Some may say blackly, angrily, accuse him of trying to blacken the English language, to give it a black eye by writing such black words. They may denigrate him by accusing him of being black-hearted, of having a black outlook on life, of being a blackguard, which would certainly be a black mark against him. Some may blackbrow at him and hope that a black cat crosses in front of him because of this black deed. He may become a black sheep who will be blackballed by being placed on a black list in an attempt to blackmail him to retract his words. But attempts to blackjack him will have a Chinaman's chance of success, for he is not a yellow-bellied Indian giver of words who will whitewash a black lie. He challenges the purity and innocence of the English language. He doesn't see things in black and white, if there ever was black and white terms, for he is a white man, if there ever was one. However, it'd be a black day when he would not call a spade, even though some will suggest a white man calling the English language racist is like the pot calling the kettle black. While many may niggardly in their support, others will be honest and decent. And to them, he says, that's very white of you.
So Robert Moore was writing in a joking way to say that we're just not even aware of how the very language that we speak is embedded with racist terms. And it doesn't have to be, because I've talked to friends from Mali and I was told that black represents things that are good in that language. Black water is the best water, pure water. The black sun is the sun at midday that's the strongest and most and best for plants. Black heart is someone who is doing what they should be doing and is serving things well.
Okay, so I wanted to just share that clip that all what we do is pretty much subconscious. And so if the language that we're using has racist undertones, then of course we are perpetuating these things, which is going to ultimately impact our future. So what shapes our reality? Both history and language shapes our reality. So let me just show you this clip right here. And this is going to get us into our activity today. Ra'u Nefer Amen talks about how schooling is a part of that manipulation of our consciousness and reality. And it's just a 2-minute clip.
All schooling is giving names, descriptions, and explanations about things, you see? Now, this is what happens, though. When you use what you call your intellectual abilities, C is the reality. B is the intellectual, symbolic representation of that reality C. With me now? A is you. And every time you want to know the reality C, you go through the symbol B. So no matter how nimble-minded you are, no matter how many PhDs you have, you see, you are never looking directly at the reality C. You are looking at the symbol B. You're always looking at something that represents something that's standing in for the reality. And no symbol, no matter how well constructed, can contain reality itself. This is a trap. Because your enemy has figured out how to hide more reality than he reveals through symbols. But understand that.
Okay, so
All
excuse me, what he's saying here is that reality would be the referent. So whatever the word or vocabulary or whatever it is that we're trying to convey to get at reality, we don't necessarily get to it because of that symbol B that we're using to get in there. So the example that I like to use is chair. I could give you the word chair and your mind would think of all of these different variances, but it may not necessarily get to reality. So what I have come up with is a language pathway map that I'm using with my students here, where I will give them the word or the vocabulary. And then that is linked to the semantics. So if we look at this side here, semantics allows for the multiple meanings of words. This is where word connotations are produced. So when we teach connotation and denotation, it happens here. As connotations change over time, word meanings provide the child with the distilled results of the history of his or her society. That, remember, we saw that quote earlier. So these meanings are changing over time. So with semantics, this allows for the manipulation of thought by hiding reality, because now I'm giving this word a new meaning. As a result, manipulation of thought contributes to what we call social engineering. We are being socially engineered through the language. And so our realities are being manipulated. So let's say, for example, the word brat, right? This is a new phenomena. I heard in the news, Kamala is brat. And I'm like, oh my God, they're saying she's a brat? And in my mind, I'm thinking a child, typically a badly behaved one. But thanks to neologism, a newly coined word or expression has come about where brat now means edgy, imperfect, and confident, as opposed to polished, poised, and clean cut. Okay, so right before our eyes here, we just got socially engineered to see brat in a good light, right? So that takes me to this quote here. The basic tool for the manipulation of reality is the manipulation of words. If you can control the meaning of words, you can control the people who must use the words. And that's Philip K. Dick. So who is controlling the meanings of these words? Because when we teach kids vocabulary, we mostly teach the connotation. We don't really do too much with the denotation. And when we think about the denotation, that is the dictionary, going to the dictionary and getting the true meaning of words. The connotation is an idea that is implied or suggested, right? So if we're using this term here, say, for example, the word family, what comes to mind? An idea that, there's this group of people that's together, that's related somehow. But if you actually look at the denotation of that word and you trace it back to its etymological roots, you'll see something else. So social engineering happens in between the lines, that implicit element that we're teaching our students when we're teaching word study and vocabulary. So here's Dr. John Henrik Clarke saying why denotation is important. When we're teaching connotation, we should also teach denotation.
I'm somewhat of a purist in relationship to the dictionary, too. Things must mean what they mean. Right. I think we need to be a little more alert, read more, think more. We need more study groups. Yes. Yeah. Be more protective of our community.
Okay, so you heard what he said. Things must mean what they mean, right? We should teach children to be purists when it comes to word meanings and not playing around with this semantics. So here, I'd like to show you something called structured word inquiry, or SWI. And according to Bowers and Kirby, it is literacy instruction that engages learners of all ages and abilities by making sense of our surprisingly logical spelling system. So they're linking spelling to etymology to get at the true meaning, the purest meaning of a word. So English spelling can only be understood through scientific investigation of the interrelationship of morphology. So morphology is your bases, your affixes, the smallest unit of meaning within a word, and then etymology. And a lot of times in school, we leave etymology out. Etymology is the historical influences. Now, remember, we're saying we don't want our history manipulated. So why are you teaching me semantics? You should be teaching me etymology so that I can get at the true meaning of the word so that history is not manipulated. And then we have phonology, which is the grapheme-phoneme correspondence. So I want to show you this clip, and then we're going to get into the exercise that I had planned. This is Abdullah Bey, and he is in Philadelphia. He does workshops at Temple University teaching about etymology. So let's look at this, and then this will prepare us for our exercise.
True meaning is meaning. Now we've all heard meaning. This word means this. What is the meaning of this word? What is the meaning of color? What is the meaning of nice? What is the meaning of chair? What is the, I'm going to a dictionary to look up the meaning of this word or that word and so forth. Well, we never heard, we don't hear this in school and at the workplace, at restaurants. You never hear people say, what is the true meaning of the word nice? What is the true meaning of the word slave? What is the true meaning of the word color? I'm going to go to the dictionary to look up the true meaning of this word. You never hear true meaning. What is true meaning? What's the difference between true meaning and meaning? What's the difference? Wouldn't they be the same? What's this true meaning about? Aren't all meanings true meanings? What are you talking about, Abdullah, Brother Bay? What's the difference? All right. So we have etymology. That's from the Greek. It's from the Greek. Meaning, all right, the true is this here means true, real, origin. All right. Word, theory. All right. Study of. All right. Real, true, real meaning. True, real origin, and history. So etymology is the history, origin, true meaning of words. All right, so we have here. So we have over here semantics. This is the study of meaning. The study of this deals with the study of meaning. Of words. This is the study of the history, origin, and true meaning of words. That's the difference. This is a study of the history, origin, and true meaning of words. Semantics is the study of meaning. So you have two different fields, and they have two different objectives. Objectives are not the same. So for this, let's look at slave. So let's look what's the difference between etymology and semantics? That will deal with methodology. The difference is in the methodology. The methodology is different. The methodology for an etymologist and looking at the word slave, well, tracing the word back to its oldest known historical meaning, its true meaning, and looking at how that word has been transliterated in other languages, the cognates to that word, what is the form of the word in the various languages, whereas semanticists will look at how various meanings came about, what were given to this word, slave. So we have the word slave here. The semantics is not so much concerned with the history and origin and true meaning of the word. We're going to concern with how the word slave, in this case slave, acquired its various meanings. How the word slave acquired its various meanings. A semanticist, an etymologist, is not concerned with how a word acquired its various meanings. A semanticist wants to know what is the oldest historically known meaning, what is the true meaning of the word. What is the true meaning of the word, not its various meanings, over the period of time period. So let's say semanticist's approach would be, we want to look at the word slave over the period of 500 years. So let's say 500 years time period. And we want to study the when particular meanings came about for the word slave, or for any word. When, at what time period, so let me see the dictionary out. Explaining the difference.
It's on the page.
Well, it doesn't matter what word it is. It don't have to, it's dealing with the, all right, so we're looking at the entry-level meanings. We have your entry-level meanings. Your entry-level meanings would be, all right, they're numbered, 1, 2, it could have 5, entry could be 7, 15, 20, all right? Then it's close to there may be other entries that a group of lexicographers, those who put together dictionaries, did not put in there, because they don't put all the entries in, depending on what dictionary you're looking at. If they had the funding to do that, you may have Oxford, got Webster's, got Funkin Wagno. All right, so you have these various dictionaries, and you have various people, these various groups have different funding. That's also a factor. So the entry may have 3 to maybe 5 or 10. So semanticists would look at these various entries. So, well, when did these various entries come about? Was this meaning came about 200 years ago, or this one came 500 or 400 years ago, and this meaning came about, and back in 1600 it meant this. Back in 1800 it meant this. Back in, all right. Where semanticists and etymologists approach is, what is its earliest known meaning? What is its earliest? Its earliest, its oldest, its historical, true meaning. So these are different methodologies, there's different goals and objectives, different approaches, different focus. I implore that you study both. I study both, and I've been studying both for years. And I've been studying it because this was introduced to me by Professor Burton, semantics, because we would look at the semantical classification of various verbs or prepositions, and not so. You often hear people say, you know, you're speaking in semantics. What that means, you're speaking semantics, they haven't studied semantics. You're speaking semantics. You'll hear people say that, but yet they haven't studied it in depth or studied it at all. They probably heard people say that. All right, so the difference in approaches with etymology and semantics, the study of the meaning of words, the study of the history, origin, and true meaning of words. Any questions, Amanda?
Okay, and there's some great comments in the chat. Thank you, guys. So this is coming out of a word reading program that I use with teachers. I teach teachers at a community college in Maryland, and I teach them how to teach reading. And in this program, they classify the dimensions of word knowledge. What do you notice is missing? We have multiple meanings of words here, which would be the semantics. But what did they leave out? The etymology.
The history. Yeah.
Yes, the history, exactly, the true meaning of words. And so what I would like to show you is, excuse me, let me fast forward here in my presentation here, is how do we do this? How do we teach children the true meaning of words? And these are a sample of words that Abdullah Bey uses in his classes. But for the sake of time, I'm just going to go through the exercise so that I can have some question and answer time at the end. So what you want to do is you want to introduce the target word, whatever that key vocabulary word is. You're going to identify the established meaning, which is the dictionary meaning. So you have the children look at those entries, and a lot of times they don't understand those entries. So if the word is a noun or if it's an adjective or verb, they need to say what part of speech that word is. So that way, when they look at the entries, they see how the meaning of that word has changed and developed all these different meanings over time. And then to get at the true meaning of the word, what does that word really mean? We would have them to look up the etymology of the word. And then if we want to identify the referent, how does the word currently inferred, how do we think about that word? And then to what extent, which would be the reflection part, is the established meaning different from the true meaning? And I always like to show this example with Abdullah's word of nice, right? So when you tell children, you know, what's the meaning of nice? They'll say, oh, it's good, it's pleasant, it's wonderful. And then when they go to the etymological dictionary and look up the word, the original meaning of the word, it actually meant foolish. So here at the bottom, we would put the word nice here. The children would, you know, generate their meaning or use a dictionary and then use the etymological dictionary to get the true meaning. And then whatever reality is how we currently infer it, so they can get a picture that might represent the word nice in the best way that they can. But the thought part here is if we want children to be purists, we will ask, why the change? Why does nice now mean something that's good and pleasant when, you know, 500 years ago it meant foolish or whatever? So then they start grappling with how people actually have control over the language, right? So let me just share with you some those words here. We have family, which you would think has positive connotations, but actually family meant servants of a household. So a lot of people will tell you avoid the word family and use kin instead, right? You have the word color. In this case, we're talking about skin color or complexion. That's how we use it today. But years ago, it meant to cover or conceal or to save. So how do we go from color being, you know, like a box of Crayola crayons to cover or conceal? What happened over time where people decided to change these meanings of words, right? So One thing that I wanted to highlight here is dictionaries. There's different dictionaries to choose from. I don't necessarily have a favorite. I do use Cambridge a lot. And then when it comes to digital resources, I use these resources to teach word inquiry. And on here, we have the etymological dictionary. I don't know if I added it to there, but on the website, I did add it. And so I would like to end with how do we use wordless picture books? Because wordless picture books is a way that we can get kids to generate their own language, and then we could see, okay, are the words that we're using in its purest form, or have they changed over time? So it gets kids more word conscious, if you will. So in my last few minutes, let me just show this clip here, and then I'll open up for questions. Another by Christian Robinson. We are the children of the cosmos. At night, we return to the waters of none. The portal of possibilities allows us ancestral communication with the past and the future. The future awaits us. What have we done today that will influence the future? Our dreams show us what's in store. Don't be afraid of the future. Mfudishi Jehutimus claims Western hegemony has us all upside down, inside out, and backward. What can we, the children of the cosmos, do to correct this? What can the future be when Western hegemony is no longer? Will it be the future that we want? A future of sovereignty with the freedom to move without borders? A future where the knowledge of our ancestors is brought to light? A future of spiritual and material prosperity? Uncolonized spaces and time to work and play? Uncolonized spaces and time where we can have our say? Uncolonized spaces and time where we can be our true African selves? Uncolonized spaces and time where self-actualization on Maslow's hierarchy of needs is guaranteed to come to fruition. What future do we want for our community and ourselves? What can we do today to make that future possible? The future is not far, and the potential is always there. A future where everyone is guaranteed food, clothing, shelter, and safety. At night, we return to the waters of none. The portal of possibilities allows us ancestral communication with the future and the past. When the portal closes, we return to the tombs of our divine person to do our earthly tasks. The red mouse took us to the future. Perhaps the blue mouse may take us to our past. For Steve, uncolonized spaces and time to just be free. We are the children of the cosmos. Thank you, everyone. I tried to rush through it because there's so much that I wanted to share. But an hour goes by so fast. So now if you have any questions for me, I'm open for questions or comments.
That was beautiful. Oh my goodness. Yo, that was perfect timing too, right after my presentation. To connect the words and all of that. You have me pulling out these books. There's like the facts and file
Oh,
dictionary,
yes.
and then this one on Proverbs. Like, what do they mean? Like when I read that the rule of thumb actually comes from an old law that a man was allowed to beat his wife with anything as long as it was
Yes.
no wider than his thumb. So
Yes.
as long as it wasn't wider than his thumb, he could beat her with it and it was okay. It was legal. So I'm like, where do these words come from? I love these types of books. So this is beautiful. Oh, that was so powerful. I had to facilitate a presentation around the N word and why people
Yes.
to this day. This, yes, getting down to the origin of like what it still means, like semantics versus the historical origin. Like when did we change it? So I'm thinking like a cool activity for youth or for people could be to create a dictionary entry, a thorough dictionary entry for the N word.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That would be powerful. And people have done it. So there are resources out there that will show you how it has changed over time and where it originated from. So excellent point.
Thank you for this. This is beautiful.
Oh, yeah. Let's see. Any questions in the chat?
I'm still speechless. There was so much presented that is like, I have no words for the words. But thank you so much for that. Gives me an opportunity to do further research.
Yes,
Thank you.
that's what I want you to do. You're so welcome. Guys, please access that Google site because everything that I kind of wanted to do, I put it all there. And I actually wanted us to kind of break out into different teams and see what is that origin of words. But the key piece here is that we want to teach our students to know what that true meaning is and then how has it changed? Because we're running around saying we're people of color. But if you look at the Black's dictionary, they don't acknowledge people of color. So we will never get reparations. We will never have our nationhood established if we're saying we're people of color, because the word color means to cover. So in a sense, we're invisible. So when you're saying we're people of color, you're saying I'm invisible. And so hegemony can continue to live on, right? We don't want that.
Did you put the Google site in the chat, please?
Oh, yes. Let me put that back in the chat. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. And were there any other questions or comments? Let's see here. Could we please get the link again? Oh, yes. So let me grab that link up here.
Yeah, while you're doing that, I just wanted to say again, I concur that I really appreciate all the information and your insightfulness and into all of this, right? Because I know that family is really huge, right? In our communities and in our spaces. And just hearing that and, knowing the background now, because now I know that I have to do a better job, right? Of really understanding the history of words and their meanings, and not just relying on the semantics, right? Because I know that that's what we often do a lot of times. I know that me personally, that I'm very guilty of that. So you've pushed me now, right? To do a better job at doing my due diligence. So when I go and visit my kinfolk, right? My language will change and I will move differently moving forward. Okay.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much for that.
You're welcome. And please give yourself grace because we all are in that trap. We're using the colonizer's language.
Yes.
And until we can, get a grips of the true, purest form of the language, we fall in that trap. But the more we learn, the better we do, right?
Right. Absolutely. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. And let's see here. There's so much violence in American English. Absolutely. That's why, guys, if you go on the website and you look up the reading, it's entitled Racism in English. If you click on that, you will see how this colonizer's language, by the way, guys, the history of English, it used to be more of a language of action and verbs, but because of slavery, they converted a lot of words into nouns. So a person is now a thing, right? That is horrible because we are living, we are vibrant. We should not be a noun. We should be verbs. We should be action. But because of slavery and capitalization, they converted all of these words into nouns so that they become possessions. And so when we're teaching parts of speech, guys, and we say a noun is a person, oh, guys, think about that. Why would the English colonizers have people as nouns, right? So these are entryways that we can really dissect the language that we're currently using and really get at how do we work ourselves out of that until we can learn our native tongue, if you will.
I even had a quick aside, if you don't mind.
Oh, sure.
I heard something about when, like, as the story was being read about like Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yes.
And I've been introduced to another paradigm instead, and it's Manfred Max Neef's fundamental human scale development.
Oh.
And why is that useful? Because it, as opposed to Maslow's like very clear hierarchy, Max Neef's leans toward like nodes of understanding, so that you can it's almost like, whereas if you're in Maslow, if your physical needs are not met, you can never get all the way up the pyramid to self-actualization, right? But like in Max Neef's, it doesn't work that way. It works like you can have each little like node be activated or not activated, or like kind of turned on or not. And it's like, it goes into all of this really amazing thinking that I think meets the needs of our communities more, because theoretically, like, our ancestors were self-actualizing while under enslavement, right?
Exactly.
So that hierarchy doesn't make any sense, right? There has to be something else going on here where they could dream about future scapes, future lives, future thinking, and still be without their basic needs met. So like I've now started to like learn more about his like theory, and he's like I'm not sure if he's from like Venezuela or spiritual aspects. I'm not sure, I can't remember off the top of my head right now where he's from, but please look him up, because I think the thinking so much better aligns with our communities and our children. And gosh, I'm like, just what I'm learning, and even the words that he is using versus the words that Maslow is using are like super helpful. So now I've got to go back and apply the etymology to all those things and try to figure out how this goes together. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. And I want to make sure I have it right. You said Manfred Max Needs?
Yep, it's Manfred Max, like regular Max, Neef. And I think he's either Venezuelan or like Chilean. I can't remember what his history is, but the whole point of this, his kind of model, is that it walks away from the hierarchy, and it has much of a more focus on community. Like us as an us, people as an us, as opposed to the kind of individualism, isolationist that comes around with I'll put it in there. But I just got introduced to this and I was like, this is brilliant. Why don't we teach this more? My goodness.
Exactly, because I'd never heard of this work. So thank you for sharing that. Oh, thank you, guys. So I don't want to monopolize all of your time, but thank you. And if there's not any other questions, I have my contact information at the bottom of the website, and I am rebranding myself as an Ubuntu-gogist. I don't want to teach pedagogy anymore, because if you look at the word of pedagogy, it goes back to pedia meaning teaching male children, and we don't want to just teach males. We want to teach male and female. So we want to be Ubuntu, which includes all of us. I am because we are, right? So Ubuntu-Goji is what we want to start switching to. So I am branding myself as an Ubuntu-Gogist. Let's see, African ancestrology.
Ancestrology. Yeah.
Ancestrology. Yes, I like that.
I have a chapter coming out on that term. It's basically just intentionally doing what you just did, like Ubuntu Goji, for naming African Ancestrology, for the fact that our pedagogy, if you will, or our way of teaching must include African ancestral wisdom. That's
absolutely all. Wow. And I'm going to be following you because I'm interested in all of your work. The Black Cake, this right here.
Likewise. Yeah. Likewise.
Because what you just mentioned is one of the tenets in Ubuntu Goji, which is religio spirituality, which is linked to our ancestralism. And so when people think of that, they think, spook, but we have to get out of that because the colonizers have us thinking with those terms. Remember, semantics, they change the meaning of these words. And so we gravitate to the semantic meaning and not the true meaning. So a part of breaking those chains is getting back at the true meaning of the word. Any other thoughts? Thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.